The universe was vast and empty, yet it was never silent. Stars burned with ancient voices, worlds whispered with magnetic fields, and the great void between galaxies carried the faint murmur of light echoing across eons. Humanity had learned to listen, and in listening, they discovered that the cosmos had stories to tell. The signal came on the 32nd year of the fifth expansion. At first, it was dismissed as a mathematical anomaly, a jitter in the deep-range receivers stationed along the halo of the Perseus arm. It was not the first time that static had been mistaken for intelligence. Yet this was different. The signal repeated itself, stubborn as heartbeat, a pulse wrapped in deliberate intervals. For 9 days the message continued, growing stronger, clearer, until no doubt remained. It was not nature. It was not the echo of stars colliding or the groan of neutron tides. It was language. Humanity gathered to listen. The great shipyards of Mars ceased their endless construction to broadcast the signal through the inner system. Colonists on Europa left their frozen domes and huddled in listening halls. The agricultural communes of New Sumeria on Kepler 442 beheld vigils beneath the warm glow of their second sun. Even the proud Void Rangers, who lived their lives drifting between gas giants and asteroid belts, stopped their eternal wandering to tune their receivers. The message was a cry. A desperate plea carried on fractured waves of energy. The alien tongue was harsh, filled with guttural tones and piercing whistles, but it carried weight. The linguists of Earth translated the essentials within weeks. We are dying, we are burning. If you hear this, we beg you, do not let us vanish. Come. The name of the species, buried deep within their code, translated as the Sulari. Their world was burning under the pressure of an enemy that had ground them into dust for centuries. Cities had fallen, seas had been poisoned. Skies, once bright with twin moons, had turned black with ash. Their signal was not only a request, it was a dirge. For many among humanity, this was not their concern. Earth's governments had spent centuries debating intervention. The memory of their own past was sharp. Wars fought over scarce resources, nations fractured by pride, whole continents bleeding for nothing. Why should they pour their blood into another species' war? Had they not earned the right to stand apart from the chaos of the galaxy? But others remembered something different. They remembered the long nights when Earth's first astronauts had looked back on their home, a pale sphere adrift in blackness, and felt how fragile and singular it was. They remembered the centuries of famine and plague when strangers reached out to strangers and found the strength to endure. They remembered the words of poets and philosophers who insisted, even in the darkest hours, that life had meaning only when it was shared. The Sulari called out to the stars. Humanity answered. The first ships to depart were not battleships nor mighty carriers. They were relief vessels, massive hulls filled with grain seeds, water reclamation units, atmospheric filters, and medical archives. They bore not banners of war, but symbols of aid. On their sides was painted a simple design, an open hand surrounded by stars. The voyage was long. The Sulari world lay far beyond mapped space, in a region of unstable wormholes and hostile anomalies where no human explorer had yet dared to linger. The journey took nearly 6 years by the measure of Earth, during which the Sulari signal grew weaker, as though their very voices were fading. The fleet of aid ships was not alone. Escorting them were volunteers, warriors, engineers, scientists, and dreamers who had sworn to protect the mission. They called themselves the Guardians of Dawn, though no government had appointed them and no authority had demanded their service. They came because they could not imagine turning away. When at last the fleet emerged from the final wormhole, the Sulari system stretched before them like a wound. Their sun was dimmed by ash. The outer planets bore scars of bombardment. The homeworld itself was a cracked jewel, its once blue oceans stained black, its continents lined with fire scars visible even from orbit. Above it circled the remnants of a fleet, not proud defenders, but shattered hulks drifting in silence. And then, for the first time, the Sulari spoke directly. A frail voice crackled through the comms, half broken by interference. The words were halting, as though shaped by someone unused to the human tongue. Strangers, you came. Against all silence, you came. On every human ship, men and women leaned closer to their speakers, hearing not alien words but something deeper: awe, relief, disbelief that anyone had heard their cry. Captain Elias Navarro, commander of the relief fleet, stood at the bridge of the Radiant Promise, gazing at the wounded world. His voice carried through the fleet-wide channel. We did not come as conquerors. We came because no people should suffer alone. We are here, and we will not abandon you. The Sulari wept, their tears described later as crystalline drops that shimmered against the light. For a brief moment, even as fire still burned across their world, hope returned to them. But hope, humanity soon learned, was not enough. The enemy revealed themselves within weeks. They came like a tide of blades across the void. Their ships were jagged, built for intimidation as much as destruction, each one bristling with weapons that bled light into the dark. They were not machines of survival, but of conquest, and they bore no hesitation in turning their fury against the newcomers. The Sulari whispered the enemy's name with dread: the Cathari. For centuries, the Cathari had hunted them, seeking not their land or their resources, but their extinction. The reasons were lost to time. Some claimed the Sulari had once defied them. Others said the Cathari saw weakness as an offense, demanding extermination of any who failed to match their strength. Whatever the truth, the Cathari did not negotiate. They did not recognize surrender. They only destroyed. The humans had come to give food and medicine. Now they found themselves standing in the path of annihilation. The first battle was chaos. The relief fleet was not designed for war, and the Guardians of Dawn were outnumbered 10-1. But where the Cathari fought with cruelty, humanity fought with stubbornness. Their ships were smaller, more fragile, but they darted through the dark with ingenuity and courage, striking in ways the enemy had never known. The battle did not end in victory, but neither did it end in defeat. For the first time in centuries, the Cathari withdrew, leaving the Sulari alive for another day. Word spread quickly across the Sulari survivors. The strangers had come, and they had stood against the Devourers. For the first time in living memory, the Sulari believed they might not be alone in their fight. Humanity had taken their first step into a war they did not start, but could not turn away from. Far from the battlefield, in quiet chambers of Earth, debates raged. Was it wise to entangle humanity in another species' war? Could they afford the losses? Should they not focus on their own survival? But among the people, the answer was clear. Across colonies and stations, across the ocean worlds and the desert moons, billions watched the transmissions from the Sulari front. They saw children pulled from ruins, fed by human hands. They saw strangers and humans fighting side by side, bleeding for one another. The stars had called, and humanity had answered. It would not be the last time. The Radiant Promise cut a slow path above the wounded Sulari world, its hull gleaming faintly against the broken light of the ash-cloaked star. Around it, the rest of the relief fleet held formation, 28 ships in all, each with a different purpose. Some carried agricultural supplies, others hospitals, others the archives of human science compressed into crystalline memory cores. To the Sulari, who had watched their own fleets burn away century after century, the sight of such vessels was overwhelming. From the surface, survivors gathered in what ruins still stood and watched the human ships with disbelief. They had expected weapons. They had expected conquerors. Instead, they saw immense hulls shaped not for destruction, but preservation, carriers of life rather than death. But they also saw the Guardians of Dawn, sleeker warships that flanked the relief fleet like wolves guarding a flock. Their weapons glimmered faintly in the gloom, a reminder that compassion alone could not shield against the Cathari. On the bridge of the Radiant Promise, Captain Elias Navarro listened as his officers reported the status of their efforts. "Atmospheric filters ready for deployment," said Helena Mbeki, chief engineer. "We can stabilize the air in their largest shelters within 20 days if the Cathari do not strike again." Hydroponic pods are already being lowered, added Arjun Patel, agricultural specialist. It will not be much, but it will feed thousands, perhaps more, if the Sulari adapt quickly to Terran crops. Navarro nodded, his eyes fixed on the planet below. It looked like a jewel buried in soot, a world whose beauty had been strangled but not extinguished. He had seen devastation before, mining colonies scarred by greed, stations gutted by rebellion, but nothing compared to this. This was not the aftermath of disaster. This was survival clinging by its last threads. The Sulari themselves arrived in orbit by means of battered transports. Their ships were skeletal, patched with whatever scrap they could find, their engines coughing out erratic trails of energy. When they docked with the human vessels, their crews staggered out half-starved, eyes sunken, skin marred by ash-borne diseases. Dr. Lion Joe, chief medic of the Radiant Promise, was the first to greet them. She had prepared her staff for anything, but the reality still shook her. "These people are walking ghosts," she whispered, as the first group was carried onto stretchers. "They should have been dead weeks ago. Only sheer stubbornness has kept them breathing." Navarro stepped forward to meet the Sulari delegation. They were tall, thin beings, with translucent skin that shimmered faintly like oil on water. Their eyes were wide, luminous orbs, glowing faint blue in the dim light. Each movement they made was deliberate, as though every gesture was weighed against the cost of wasted strength. The leader of the delegation introduced herself with a series of whistles and tones, then spoke haltingly in broken human speech. "I am Alari of the Sulari," she said. "We are honored. You came, though none ever came before." Navarro bowed his head slightly. "We heard your call. Humanity does not ignore those who suffer." Alari studied him for a long moment. "We feared you were hunters. Like the Kethari, we feared your ships carried fire, yet you bring life." Dr. Joe stepped forward. "We bring medicine, food, and water. Your people will be cared for." A ripple passed through the Sulari delegation. Some of them wept openly, their crystalline tears scattering tiny prisms of light. Others reached out and touched the human doctors, as though needing to confirm that they were real. But not all the Sulari greeted them with trust. On the second day, a different delegation arrived, warriors clad in armor patched together from scavenged metal. They were gaunt but unbowed, their eyes sharp with suspicion. Their leader, a scarred veteran named Veya, confronted Navarro directly. "You say you come with mercy," Veya said, his words sharper than Alari's halting tones. "But mercy has no place in war. We have begged the stars for help and none came. Why should we trust you? Why should we believe you are not another knife disguised as an open hand?" Navarro met his gaze without flinching. "Because we do not seek to rule you. We came with ships of aid, not conquest, but we will not abandon you to the Kethari. If you fight, we will stand beside you." Veya's luminous eyes narrowed. "Words are air. When the Kethari return, we will see if your species bleeds." Navarro did not argue. He only extended his hand, palm open, a gesture as old as humanity. After a long pause, Veya clasped it with surprising strength. "Then bleed with us," the warrior said. The days that followed were filled with labor. Human engineers worked side by side with Sulari survivors to rebuild shelters, filter poisoned water, and plant the first Terran crops in ash-choked soil. Children watched in wonder as hydroponic towers unfolded like giant flowers, each sprouting green vines that promised food where there had been none. Doctors treated diseases long left unchecked, marveling at the resilience of Sulari biology. Though frail in appearance, their bodies adapted swiftly to human medicine, as though they had been waiting all their lives for relief. Not all the work was peaceful. Guardians of Dawn patrols reported skirmishes at the edge of the system. Kethari raiding craft tested the defenses, probing for weakness. Each time, the Guardians fought them back with daring maneuvers, human pilots risking everything to shield the fragile relief fleet. Among the Sulari, a strange transformation began. Where despair had hollowed them, hope now stirred. Survivors began to sing again, voices rising in haunting choruses that echoed through ruined cities. They painted symbols of the human open hand alongside their own star mark, uniting the two as a promise of survival. And yet, beneath the surface, fear remained. Alari confided in Navarro during one of their late meetings. "We are grateful," she said softly, her luminous eyes dim with worry. "But you do not understand the Kethari. They are not raiders, they are not rivals, they are death given shape. They will not stop until every Sulari voice is gone." Navarro's reply was steady. "Then they will have to silence humanity first." The first true test came on the 14th day. A Sulari settlement on the northern continent had begun to recover under human aid. Crops were sprouting, shelters rebuilt, children laughing for the first time in years. It was there the Kethari struck. Their ships fell like knives from orbit, bombarding with merciless precision. Human fighters launched immediately, guardians of dawn ships tearing into the enemy line with speed and fury. The battle was vicious, a storm of fire against the darkness. On the ground, human soldiers and Sulari warriors fought shoulder to shoulder, defending civilians as Kethari dropcraft unleashed waves of brutal infantry. Navarro himself led a ground team, rifle in hand, standing in the ash-strewn streets beside Veya. "Here they come," Veya shouted as the first Kethari burst through the smoke. The enemy were towering, angular beings clad in armor that seemed grown rather than forged. Their limbs were sharp, their faces hidden behind jagged masks. They moved with a predatory grace, striking with weapons that hissed and burned through stone. But humanity did not yield. Navarro fired until his weapon seared his palms, while Veya's blade carved arcs of light through the enemy ranks. Dr. Joe dragged the wounded to safety, refusing to abandon even strangers she could not understand. Guardians swooped overhead, strafing enemy positions with fire that turned the tide of battle. When at last the Kethari withdrew, leaving behind smoking ruins and broken bodies, the settlement still stood. Hundreds of Sulari had been saved. In the aftermath, Veya turned to Navarro, his face streaked with ash and blood. "You bleed," he said simply. "You bleed with us." Navarro clasped his arm, a bond sealed in battle, "And we will keep bleeding if that is what it takes." That night the Sulari sang a new song. It was not a dirge nor a lament. It was a hymn of survival, woven with gratitude and fierce determination. The humans listened in silence, humbled by the weight of it. The Sulari had lost much, but in the fleet of strangers they had found something they had thought impossible, allies who would not abandon them, no matter the cost. Above the scarred world, the stars shone faintly through the ash. For the first time in generations, the Sulari believed the light might one day return. The Sulari world of Sarethas had once been a cradle of brilliance. Its seas had shimmered with emerald light, its skies painted in hues of silver blue beneath the dance of twin moons. Towers of crystal and stone had risen high, glowing softly at night with bioluminescent artistry. Songs had carried across the waters, and the Sulari believed their voices could bind them to the very stars. Now Sarethas was a mausoleum. When the human fleet extended its patrols beyond the first settlements, they discovered cities reduced to molten glass, forests transformed into blackened skeletons, oceans choked with sludge and corpses. Sulari guides wept as they led human envoys through the ruins, telling stories of what had been. "This was Rilith," Alari said softly as she guided Captain Navarro and Dr. Joe across a crumbling plaza. The shattered remains of towers jutted around them like broken teeth. "It was our center of art. Every child sang their first song here beneath the moons. Now listen." They listened. Only the wind howled through the wreckage. Dr. Joe knelt to examine the ground. Among the ashes, she found fragments of carved crystal, etched with intricate patterns, music captured in physical form, a practice the Sulari had cherished for millennia. She held it gently, as though afraid her touch might erase the last memory of beauty. "This was not simply war," Joe said grimly. "It was erasure." Navarro clenched his fists. He had fought wars before, seen cities shattered by orbital strikes, but there was something different here, something more deliberate. The Kethari had not only conquered, They had annihilated every trace of what the Sulari had been. The further the humans traveled, the more they saw the scale of the devastation. On the southern continent, vast fields of ash stretched for thousands of kilometers where crops had once grown. The soil was poisoned, heavy with chemicals that ensured nothing could sprout again. Human agricultural specialists ran tests, their faces pale as they reported back. They salted the earth, Patel said in disbelief. Not in the old sense of scattering salt, but with engineered toxins. They wanted to make sure no one could ever live here again. On the western oceans, entire reefs had been boiled by thermal bombardment. The water was lifeless, a black expanse that smelled of oil and death. Human divers who descended in armored suits found the skeletal remains of once vast creatures, their bodies warped by radiation. Alari stood on the deck of the observation vessel, her translucent skin faintly glowing in grief. "We sang to the seas every year," she whispered. "We believed the great leviathans answered us. Now the ocean is silent. We are the last voice." The human crew stood with her in silence. None could find words. And yet, amidst the ruins, life endured. In hidden valleys shielded by mountains, enclaves of Sulari survivors had clung to existence. They had no power, no medicine, and little food, yet they endured with a ferocity born of desperation. When human ships descended to offer aid, many fell to their knees in disbelief, convinced they were dreaming. Children who had never known laughter giggled as they tasted their first bite of bread, their first sip of clean water. Elders who had long accepted death wept openly as human doctors eased their suffering. But not all the encounters were joyful. In one ruined city, Navarro and his team discovered a colony of survivors who recoiled at their presence. These Sulari had lived too long under the shadow of the Kethari, and to them, strangers from the sky could mean only death. One of them, a gaunt elder with scarred skin, hissed in fear, "You bring fire. Fire always follows outsiders. Leave us. Better we die alone than bring the Kethari upon us again." Zhu tried to explain, her voice gentle. "We are not here to harm you. We want to help." The elder shook his head violently. "Help does not exist. Only survival, and even that is stolen from us." It was Veya, standing nearby with his battered blade, who stepped forward. "These humans bled with us," he said, his voice carrying across the crowd. "I fought beside them. I saw them fall to shield our children. If you believe all outsiders bring death, then look upon me, for I stand alive because of them." The survivors stared at him, torn between fear and hope. Slowly, the elder lowered his gaze. "If you speak true, then perhaps we may endure another day." It was a fragile acceptance, but it was enough. The broken worlds told more than stories of survival. They revealed the scale of the enemy. Human scouts discovered Kethari installations on nearby moons, fortresses built of jagged black stone, bristling with weapons that glowed faintly as if alive. Within them, the enemy bred war machines, half-organic horrors that stalked the halls. The Guardians of Dawn launched daring raids, destroying what they could, but each battle cost them dearly. At a council aboard the Radiant Promise, human and Sulari leaders gathered to discuss what they had seen. The chamber was tense, filled with the scent of antiseptic and the low hum of starship engines. Alari spoke first. "You see now, our world is not wounded, it is dying. The Kethari do not wish to conquer, they wish to erase. If we cannot stop them, then all of us, Sulari and human alike, will be nothing but ash." Navarro leaned forward, his dark eyes steady. "Then we do not fight for victory alone. We fight for memory, for the proof that you existed and that no enemy could take that from you." Dr. Joe added, "We must preserve what remains, not only lives but culture, songs, stories, knowledge. If the Kethari destroy the body, the spirit must endure." Patel nodded grimly. "We will plant crops in every valley that can still hold life. We will give your people food enough to sing again." For the first time, hope flickered in the council chamber. The humans were not only warriors, they were preservers, they were builders, but Veyar spoke with harsh clarity. "Hope will not shield us when the great fleets come. We need weapons, we need strength." Navarro did not argue. He simply said, "Then we will give you both." The humans began to teach. They showed the Sulari how to build defensive grids, how to use human technology to purify water and strengthen shelters. Engineers worked side by side with Sulari craftsmen, combining techniques neither species could have imagined alone. In the ruins of Rilith, children once again learned to sing, this time accompanied by human instruments that echoed the tones of the lost Sulari choirs. The harmony was imperfect, but it was alive. And everywhere they went, the humans bore the same message: you are not alone. But the broken worlds also whispered of danger yet to come. In the outer reaches of the system, Guardians discovered fragments of shattered moons. The craters bore not the marks of simple bombardment, but something worse: massive, deliberate destruction designed to destabilize entire orbits. Lieutenant Mara Vey, one of the Guardians' most daring pilots, recorded her findings. "This was not an accident," she said in her report. "The Kethari shattered the moons to create tidal disasters on the surface. Entire coastlines must have drowned. They are not only erasing the people, they are unmaking the planet itself." The realization shook even the most hardened among them. If the Kethari would destroy entire moons, then there was nothing they would not do. That night, Navarro stood alone at the observation deck of the Radiant Promise. Below him, the Sulari world glowed faintly with fires that never seemed to go out. He thought of Earth, of its oceans and mountains, of its fragile blue beauty. What if it had been Earth beneath the Kethari's wrath? What if his people had been the ones crying out into the void, their voices fading into silence? He whispered to the stars, as though speaking to both his ancestors and those yet unborn. "We will not let them vanish, not while we still breathe." Behind him, the doors opened. Alari entered quietly, her luminous eyes reflecting the stars. "You carry the weight of both our worlds," she said softly, "but you are not alone." Navarro turned to her, his expression weary but resolute. "Neither are you." For a long moment they stood together, human and Sulari, two species bound by shared loss and a fragile thread of hope. Beyond the windows, the stars burned on, distant but watching. The broken worlds had revealed the depth of the darkness. But they had also revealed something else, that even in ruins, life could endure, and that endurance could become defiance. And defiance, Navarro knew, was the beginning of victory. News of humanity's arrival spread faster than light could travel. The Sulari had broadcast their plea across the stars, and though most civilizations ignored it, the sudden appearance of human fleets in a war zone sent ripples through neighboring systems. Some listened with curiosity, some with hope, but many with suspicion. The first to respond were the Threxil. Their ships appeared on the edge of the system, vast organic vessels that resembled colossal insects gliding through the void. Their hulls shimmered with a green-black sheen, and their movements carried an eerie grace, as though the ships themselves were alive. When they hailed the Radiant Promise, their envoy's voice was a chorus of chittering tones, translated into human speech by the fleet's linguistic cores. "We are the Threxil," the envoy said. "We have watched the Sulari suffer. We have watched the Kethari consume, and we have done nothing, for that is the way of survival. Now you come, strangers from a distant sun, with open hands and loud promises." "Why?" Captain Navarro stood before the fleet-wide transmission chamber, his voice steady. "Because life matters, because no people deserve to be erased." The Threxil Env hissed, a sound of disapproval. "You bring attention upon yourselves. The Kethari will not stop with the Sulari. They will hunt you and us, and all who linger near. You bring danger where there was silence." Dr. Joe stepped forward, her tone sharp. "Silence is not survival. Silence is surrender. If everyone hides, then the Kethari will consume each of you in turn. Humanity will not hide, we will stand." The Threxil Env considered her words, their many-faceted eyes flickering across the transmission feed. "Perhaps you will stand, but you will also fall. When you do, we will not weep." With that, the Threxil ships withdrew, vanishing into the void. The Threxil were not the only ones to take notice. Weeks later, a delegation arrived from the Drasari Collective. Their ships were angular, precise, each one identical to the next, as if stamped from a mold. The Drasari were known for their obsession with order, their societies rigidly structured around hierarchy and efficiency. Their envoy, High Speaker Tovak, spoke with clipped precision. "Human vessels," he said, "you interfere where interference is folly. The Sulari are already lost. Their culture is fractured, their population diminished, their world poisoned. To aid them is to waste resources that might better serve stronger peoples." Navarro bristled but kept his voice calm. "You would stand by and watch an entire people vanish when you could help. It is not our role to preserve the weak," Tovak replied coldly. "Survival belongs to those who earn it. If the Sulari fall, it will be the natural course of existence." Alari, who had joined the conference, stood trembling with fury. "Is that what you call the slaughter of children? Natural? You speak of strength, yet you call cowardice wisdom." Tovak ignored her anger, his gaze fixed on Navarro. "Withdraw your fleet. Do not draw the Cathari's wrath upon our sector." Navarro's reply was firm. "We will not abandon them. If that means facing the Cathari, then so be it. Humanity does not measure worth by survival alone. We measure it by compassion." The High Speaker's lips curved in disdain. "Then your compassion will be your extinction." The transmission cut. Not all neighbors were hostile. In the weeks that followed, small envoys from distant systems arrived with cautious offers. A band of wanderers known as the Alari brought healing herbs found only on their ocean worlds, curious to see if humans could use them. A delegation of miners from the storm-racked world of Duras offered raw materials, moved by human broadcasts of Sulari children singing once again. It was a fragile beginning, but it showed the galaxy was watching and deciding whether humanity was a light to follow or a flame that would burn itself out. The Sulari themselves were divided. Some, like Alari, embraced the humans as saviors. She worked tirelessly with human engineers, learning their methods and sharing her people's surviving knowledge. "Together we will build," she said often. "Together we will endure." But others whispered doubts. The humans had brought hope, yes, but also fire. The Cathari attacks had intensified since their arrival. Villages that had hidden for generations were suddenly targeted, as if the Cathari meant to punish them for daring to accept help. One night, in a gathering of Sulari leaders beneath the shattered remains of a crystalline dome, the division came to the surface. Veya, scarred warrior and ally of Navarro, stood to speak. "The humans have proven themselves. They bleed with us. They fight with us. Without them, we would already be ash." An elder named Serath rose in response, her luminous eyes dim with sorrow. "And yet because of them, more of us die. Do you not see? The Cathari do not fear us, but they fear the humans. It is their defiance that draws the wrath of the devourers upon us." Murmurs filled the chamber. Alari stepped forward, her voice clear. "Better to die with hope than to die in silence. If the humans have brought fire, then let it burn away the shadow, even if we are consumed with it." Serath's voice cracked. "Hope cannot feed children. Fire cannot heal poisoned seas. We cannot gamble our survival on strangers." Navarro stood, letting his voice cut through the debate. "We are not strangers, we are allies. We did not come to lead you, but to stand beside you. If you do not wish us here, we will leave, but we will not stop fighting the Cathari, whether on your soil or in the void." The chamber fell into silence. Sulari leaders exchanged long, haunted glances. For a people who had known only despair, the idea that another species would fight even without their blessing was almost incomprehensible. At last Veya broke the silence. "If you doubt them, then doubt me as well, for I trust them with my life. If they fall, I fall. If they fight, I fight." One by one, others stood with him. The alliance was fragile, but it held. That night, Navarro walked the ruins of the city alone, his thoughts heavy. The stars above seemed colder, distant witnesses to a struggle that might engulf them all. He wondered if humanity had made a mistake, if the doubters were right, if their compassion had only accelerated destruction. He paused at the sound of faint singing. In a half-collapsed courtyard, a group of Sulari children sat around a human medic who strummed a simple guitar. The alien voices blended with the strings, halting but earnest, learning a song not their own and making it something new. Navarro stood in silence, listening. In that moment he knew the doubters were wrong. Even if humanity burned, the song would remain. It was worth the risk. When the next Cathari assault came, it was larger than any before. Entire fleets poured into the system, their jagged ships blotting out the stars. The Threxil and the Drasari watched from afar, refusing to intervene. The Guardians of Dawn took to their ships, knowing they faced impossible odds. The Sulari warriors stood ready on the ground, armed now with human-forged weapons. The relief fleet braced itself, not for evacuation, but for defiance. Navarro's voice carried through every channel. We are the strangers who came when no one else would. We are the fleet of life against the tide of death. Stand with us. Bleed with us, and let the galaxy see that compassion is stronger than annihilation. The battle began. The Cathari came like a storm. From the far reaches of the void, their ships poured into the system, not in scattered raiding wings as before, but in vast formations, serrated hulls gleaming with cruel light. The stars themselves seemed to dim beneath their approach. Sensors counted hundreds, then thousands, until the numbers ceased to matter. It was not an attack. It was an onslaught meant to erase not only the Sulari, but any who dared to stand beside them. On the bridge of the Radiant Promise, Captain Navarro stood with his officers as the scale of the enemy became clear. The tactical display showed wave after wave of Cathari formations spreading like a cancer across the void. Lieutenant Marave's voice cracked across the channel from her fighter squadron. "Sir, we are outnumbered more than 50 to 1. If we stay, we die." Navarro's reply was steady, though his heart thundered. "Then we make them bleed for every life they try to take. No retreat, not today." The Guardians of Dawn surged forward first. Sleek human warships darted into the darkness, weaving between enemy fire, striking at weak points with precision. They had no hope of matching the Cathari ship for ship, but they had something the enemy did not: adaptability. Where the Cathari advanced in rigid formations, the humans fought with improvisation, turning debris into cover, using asteroids as weapons, luring their foes into crossfire traps. Lieutenant Vey led her squadron into the thick of it, her fighter cutting sharp arcs of light through the void. "Stay close, keep moving, hit their joints," she shouted, targeting the seams where jagged armor plates overlapped. Her squadron obeyed, striking in swarms and scattering before the enemy could respond. But for every Cathari ship that fell, 10 more surged forward. On the surface of Sarethas, the battle raged as well. The Cathari unleashed waves of dropships, disgorging armored warriors into ruined cities and shattered plains. The Sulari, armed now with human-forged rifles and fortified shelters, fought with a ferocity born of desperation. Dr. Jo found herself on the front lines, tending the wounded beneath collapsing structures. She shouted for supplies, her hands slick with blood, both human and Sulari. "Keep pressure here. No, do not close the wound. His skin heals differently." "Yes, like that. Good." Beside her, Sulari medics worked tirelessly, having learned human techniques in only weeks. Their crystalline tears glimmered as they labored, grief and hope mingled in every breath. At the barricades, Navarro fought shoulder to shoulder with Veya, his rifle spitting fire into the advancing Cathari. The enemy pressed forward with inhuman persistence, their jagged forms cutting through rubble and flame. "Hold the line," Navarro roared. "If they break us here, the shelters fall." Veya's blade cleaved through an enemy warrior, sparks hissing as alien armor shattered. "We will not break," he bellowed. For hours they held, though the ground shook with bombardment and the sky burned red with fire. In orbit, the battle reached its crescendo. The Radiant Promise shuddered as enemy fire tore across its shields. Helena Mbeki, chief engineer, shouted over the alarms. "We cannot hold much longer, Captain. Shields at 30%, engines overheating. Divert everything to the forward grid," Navarro ordered. "Keep the relief ships safe. If we fall, they must survive." Mbeki hesitated only a moment before obeying. The Cathari pressed closer, their jagged hulls looming like monstrous jaws. One by one, human ships fell, each loss marked by a flare of light against the void. Still the Guardians fought on, refusing to yield. Then, in the darkest moment, when it seemed the fleet would be swallowed whole, a new voice cut across the comms. "This is Threxil vessel Chitta of Dawn. Strangers, we come." The display lit with new signatures. Threxil ships, vast organic leviathans, emerged from the void, their hulls glowing with bioluminescent pulses. They swarmed into the battle, spitting torrents of energy that tore through Cathari lines. Moments later, another transmission. "This is Drasari Collective Vessel Precision of Order, engaging Cathari. Do not mistake this for charity." Drasari warships appeared in rigid formation, their angular hulls slicing through the enemy with ruthless efficiency. Cheers erupted across human channels. Navarro allowed himself the briefest smile. "Looks like compassion is contagious." The tide shifted. With the Threxil and Drasari joining the fray, the Cathari advance faltered. Their formations broke beneath the combined assault, their jagged ships scattering under relentless fire. On the surface, Sulari warriors rallied as news spread. "The galaxy has come," they cried. "We are not alone." Vayar fought with renewed strength, carving through enemies as though fueled by the knowledge that his people had allies at last. "See them run, Navarro. Even the Devourers can bleed." Yet victory was not without cost. Dozens of human ships lay in ruins, their crews lost to the void. Thousands of Sulari had fallen, their bodies lying among the rubble of their cities. Even as the Cathari retreated, they unleashed one final act of cruelty, detonating a captured moon to hurl shards of rock across the planet's surface. Entire regions were devastated in the resulting rain of fire. Dr. Joe collapsed beside a pile of wounded, her hands shaking, her eyes filled with horror. "So many, too many." Navarro placed a hand on her shoulder. His own uniform was scorched, his face streaked with ash, but his voice was steady. "We saved who we could, and tomorrow we will save more." When the battle ended, silence fell across the system. The Cathari had withdrawn, leaving ruin but not victory. For the first time in centuries, the Sulari had survived a full-scale assault. In the aftermath, a council convened aboard the Radiant Promise. Human, Sulari, Threxil, and Drasari leaders gathered in the same chamber, an image that would be remembered for generations. Alari spoke first. Her voice was weak but filled with fire. "Today, the Sulari stand because of strangers. Humanity brought aid when no one else would, and now others have followed. Let this be the beginning, not the end." The Threxil envoy chittered softly. "You fight with cunning, you fight with heart. Perhaps survival is not only silence." High Speaker Tovak of the Drasari gave a curt nod. "Do not mistake our aid for agreement, but strength has its uses. We will not see you fall easily." Navarro looked around the chamber, meeting each gaze in turn. "This is only the beginning. The Cathari will return, stronger than before, but so will we. Together we can stand against them. Alone we will all fall." For the first time, no one argued. That night, amid the ruins of Sarethis, a new fire burned. Not the fire of destruction, but of hope. Humans and Sulari lit lanterns together, releasing them into the ash-stained sky. One by one, the lights rose, fragile but defiant, until they formed a constellation of their own. Children sang beneath the lanterns, their voices joined by human song. The notes wove together, imperfect yet beautiful, a chorus of survival in the face of annihilation. Navarro stood beside Alari, watching the lights rise. "The fire in the dark," he murmured. "That is what we are." Alari nodded, her luminous eyes reflecting the lanterns. "Then let us burn so brightly that even the void cannot swallow us." The battle was over, but the war had left deep scars. On Sarethis, the cities lay in ruin. Towers that once sang with light stood shattered, their crystalline structures broken into shards. The seas glowed faintly with poison, scarred by centuries of Cathari harvest. Whole regions had been scoured clean by the debris storm from the shattered moon. For the Sulari, survival had always meant endurance. But now, for the first time in living memory, survival meant something more: hope. The Guardians of Dawn did not leave after the battle. Instead, they did something no one in the galaxy expected. They stayed. The relief effort began with water. Human engineers deployed purification units along the poisoned rivers, machines that could cleanse toxins and restore flow. Within days, streams that had run foul for generations shimmered with clarity. Children crowded the banks, tasting clean water for the first time in their lives. Dr. Joe wept as she watched them drink, their luminous eyes wide with disbelief. "We fight with rifles and ships," she whispered, "but this is the true victory." Beside her, a Sulari elder placed a trembling hand on her arm. "You have given us back the river of our ancestors. It is more precious than any weapon." Next came food. The humans brought seed stock from their own worlds, carefully chosen crops that could grow even in damaged soil. The Sulari had once been farmers, their crystalline cities surrounded by lush fields, but generations of war had stripped their world bare. Together, humans and Sulari cleared ground among the ruins. They planted grain, vegetables, and fruit-bearing vines. The soil resisted at first, choked by centuries of neglect, but with patient care and human technology, life began to return. When the first harvest came, a small basket of golden wheat, the Sulari gathered in awe. They touched the grains reverently, as though holding fragments of a forgotten dream. Alari broke the silence, her voice thick with emotion. "This is the gift of bread, not of battle but of life." That night they baked the first loaves in centuries. The bread was coarse, uneven, and scorched in places, but to the Sulari it was a feast. They sang as they ate, songs of renewal that echoed through the ruins. The rebuilding effort drew others. The Alari wanderers returned with vast tanks of ocean water, rich in minerals that could heal scarred soil. The Duras miners offered stone and metal, laboring side by side with humans to construct shelters. Even the Threxel, once cold and aloof, sent living vines from their ships, plants that grew into strong, flexible structures, weaving themselves into new homes. The Drasari did not sing, nor did they share in feasts, but they sent engineers. Their methods were harsh, their voices clipped, but their precision built bridges and power grids in record time. For all their disdain of compassion, they did not abandon the work once begun. In the ruins of a shattered city, a council fire was lit. Around it, human, Sulari, Threxel, Drasari, Ilari, and Duras sat together. They broke bread, passed water, and for the first time in history, a true coalition of species shared a meal. For Navarro, the days of rebuilding were both blessing and burden. He walked the ruins each morning, speaking with survivors, learning their names, helping to lift beams or carry supplies. He had always been a soldier, but now he found himself something else, a shepherd guiding not just his fleet but an entire people toward renewal. One afternoon, he found Alari kneeling in a half-rebuilt temple, her hands pressed to broken stone. "What is it?" he asked quietly. She lifted her luminous eyes. "I prayed, not to gods, to memory, to those who came before us whose voices are dust. I told them of bread and water, of children laughing, of strangers who came across the stars." Navarro stood beside her in silence. At last he said, "Then let their memory know this: we are not done. We will keep fighting, not only with rifles, but with hands and hearts." Alari touched his hand, a gesture of trust. "You are more dangerous than the Kethari. They bring death, you bring life." But not all welcomed the gifts. Among the Sulari, there remained those who doubted. Serath, the elder who had once opposed the humans, spoke her fears again. "You give us bread today," she said, her voice brittle. "But what of tomorrow? When the Kethari return, and they will return, will the humans still stand? Or will they flee, leaving us dependent on food we cannot grow, machines we cannot repair?" Her words spread unease. Some whispered that the humans had bound the Sulari with kindness more tightly than any conqueror could with chains. Navarro did not dismiss the fears. Instead, he called the people together. "We do not come to rule you," he said, standing before a crowd of thousands. "We come to stand beside you. The water we purify is yours. The bread we plant is yours. The machines we build, we will teach you to use them, to repair them, to improve them. If we are gone tomorrow, you will endure. That is our promise." The words silenced the doubts, at least for a time. But Navarro knew Serath was not entirely wrong. The Sulari had been given gifts they could not yet sustain alone. Time would be their true test. One evening, as the suns set over the broken spires of Sarethis, Dr. Joe gathered children in the courtyard of a half-rebuilt school. She told them stories of Earth, of rivers wider than mountains, of forests where light fell in green shadows, of fields that fed millions. "Your world can be this again," she said. "It will not be the same as before, but it will live." A child raised his crystalline hand. "Will the Kethari come again?" Ju's smile faltered. She could not lie. "Yes," she said softly. "But when they do, we will be ready, and you will not be alone." The children accepted the answer with solemn nods, their luminous eyes reflecting the fading light. Weeks turned into months. Where once there had been ash, now green shoots pushed through. Where once silence reigned, laughter and song returned. The Sulari began to believe that survival was not merely endurance, but renewal. For the first time in centuries, they celebrated a festival. Lanterns were hung, fires were lit, bread was shared. Humans danced with Sulari in awkward but joyful steps. Threxil clicked in strange rhythms that almost resembled music. Even the Drasari stood at the edges, silent but present, watching as though trying to understand. Navarro lifted a cup of clean water and spoke a simple toast. "To life and to those who protect it." The crowd repeated the words, their voices carrying into the night. Yet even amid joy, shadows lingered. Scouts reported Kethari activity in distant systems, greater than before. The enemy had not been destroyed, only delayed. The storm would come again, and when it did, bread and water alone would not be enough. The moons of Sarethis had begun to glow with new life. One had been shattered into deadly fragments, but the other now shone with stations orbiting its pale surface, each one a testament to renewal. Human engineers worked alongside Sulari artisans, fashioning outposts for defense and research. Lanterns drifted from the surface each night, a ritual of remembrance and resilience. But Navarro felt the unease that lay beneath the light. Every report, every scout's message, every whisper of movement in the void reminded him that peace was only a pause, never a certainty. It was during one such report that the truth emerged. Aboard the Radiant Promise, Commander Elias Rourke entered Navarro's quarters, his expression tight. He carried a data slate, its surface alive with shifting images. "You need to see this, Captain," Rourke said.